3, 2.
Welcome to BUEI Talks, Island SOS. I'm William Campbell, your host for today's presentation. This 8-part series focuses on innovative, sustainable ocean development initiatives in island nations around the globe. Each presentation will be covering a different island and a different topic. We'll be highlighting a unique perspective and involvement that islands have on ocean conservation, and we'll be showcasing the different practices that we've undertaken to safeguard surrounding oceans. The BUEI appreciates the generous support of Chubb Bermuda, our exclusive sponsor for this series. Island SOS aligns with Chubb's mission to promote a healthy and sustainable planet, to strengthen the resilience of communities, and to protect biodiversity against the effects of climate change. Today's Sustainable Ocean Strategy presentation is the 4th in our series and centers on the work being done by the National Conservation Commission in the Barbados. Both Bermuda and Barbados are recognized as tourist destinations with beautiful beaches and reef systems. With nearly 90 kilometers of coral reef just offshore, Barbados faces similar challenges to Bermuda in the protection of their coral reefs and the creatures that inhabit them. Despite the environmental similarities, you can expect beach weather all year round in Barbados. Technical Officer Carlos Gilkes will share methods used by the NCC to manage protected beach areas in Barbados, including beach maintenance, beach risk analysis, beach carrying capacity, beach stability mapping, and communication planning. Please help me in welcoming Carlos Gilkes.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to ask, before we get started, sir, what real passions and drive prompted your work on the beach and in beach conservation?
Well, I have always lived a stone's throw away from the beach, and I would have seen various beach uses through the eyes of fishermen, through the eyes of recreational users, and I was appalled at the biodiversity loss throughout the years. The species that I would have seen back in the 1990s, in comparison to now, the loss is staggering. And this prompted me to get into beach management through coral reef and marine protected areas.
Sure, something we can a lot of us can relate to. I believe Carlos has got a presentation to share with us today. We'll turn the screen over to him. Thank you, Carlos.
Right. Good evening again. And let me start by saying, let me get through the slides first, the very start. Right. Good evening. First of all, let me thank Sustainable Oceans Initiative and BUEI for inviting me to show you, through a Barbadian perspective, our concept of beach management. I'll start with the introduction, and I will take you through a brief introduction of myself, an overview of Barbados and the NCC, which is the National Conservation Commission, the managing state-owned enterprise of beaches and their management in Barbados. We will also touch on the history and role of the NCC, and then jump straight into beach management. There are several components in beach management, and I will take you through most of them. You will see some of our challenges and the solutions we have adopted to nullify these challenges. Beach management is still pretty much a work in progress, and because of the dynamics involved, some solutions might now not be the solutions for the future. Right. I will see myself as a career NCC person. I started working in NCC in 1994 as a lifeguard, and a year later I moved on to be a naturalist at Folkestone Marine Reserve, which identifies presently as the only marine protected area in Barbados. I then moved into enforcement at the same Folkestone Marine Reserve, doing daily patrols of Folkestone protected area. Prior to the onslaught of COVID-19, I was transferred to headquarters of the NCC in the capacity of technical officer, which I currently occupy. My first degree is in public sector management, and I've just recently completed my master's in natural resource and environmental management, which was done at the University of West Indies at Cave Hill. Right. Just let me also get you in tune with Barbados. Barbados is usually described as being within the island chain, but however, this is not totally true. We are distinctly outside of the island chain and is the most easterly island. If you can see my cursor, this is where Barbados is at. Right. As we just last discussed, Barbados is the most easterly island. And the following couple of pointers gives you a understanding and a bit more of Barbados. We are English speaking, is a relatively small space, only 166 square miles. We have a population of 287,000. And as most Caribbean countries, we have a high dependence on tourism. And prior to the pandemic in 2018, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, they total 1,356,000 persons that would have visited Barbados in 2018. We would have become independent in November 30th, 1966, but we have since transformed into republicanism on November 30th, 2021. The most popular person that you would identify Barbados with now at present is Rihanna. There are three dominant coasts in Barbados. There's the West Coast, which is typically idyllic, with crystal clear waters. The South Coast, where most of our visitors stay, and is characterized by semi-rough waters. However, the condition is still pristine. And the East Coast, which is the Atlantic coast. So you always imagine it would be rough and crashing, and it's only recommended for surfing events and photographs. All the coasts in Barbados are popular, and they're all characterized by high use. But the West and South coasts tend to be utilized more regularly. At this point, I must make it abundantly clear that all the beaches in Barbados are public, and they are property of the Crown. At locations where beaches are wide enough, the high water mark we use after 100 feet is recognized as a property's owner space. Right. The NCC, how best I could put it, is tasked with maintaining spaces, public spaces, and beaches across Barbados. And the NCC was conceptualized in the late 1960s when three members of Barbados National Trust were invited to government headquarters to discuss the actions to preserve and beautify the island's parks and beaches. This legislation was prepared and subsequently enacted by Parliament. The Parks and Beaches Act of 1970 duly received the Governor General's assent on the 31st of March 1970. And under the provision of this act, the Parks and Beaches Commission was appointed in 1970. We were called, the NCC was called the Parks and Beaches Commission before 1970, in the 1970s when it was designated, and then in the early 80s it morphed into the National Conservation Commission. And listed in this slide are some of the key functions and roles of the NCC. Almost all of them have elements of beach management in them, with the exception of number one, which speaks to the maintenance and conservation of natural beauty, historical buildings, and monuments. But with respect to the beaches, the NCC does not only maintain, but they have also addressed security for beach users with a complement of 78 beach rangers and 70 beach lifeguards stationed at specific beaches across the island. Extremely popular beach areas have been afforded the luxury of beach facilities maintained by caretakers who ensure a proper standard is achieved. As the managers of Folkestone Marine Reserve, as I said earlier, which is the only protected area, we, along with other stakeholders, plan to develop a network of protected areas in the achievement of Biodiversity Target 11, where governments dedicate and commit towards establishment of protected area systems. And just a brief bit on Folkestone. Folkestone is the only protected area in Barbados. And It was designated in 1981, and this makes it one of the older protected areas across the region. As MPA's goal is slightly small. It has a space of 3.5 kilometers squared on the heaviest utilized marine space on the west coast of Barbados. So there are lots of competing interests alone in this small marine protected area. However, apart from the regular beach management, such as the maintenance of beaches, we at the NCC has two departments which have a vested interest in beach management. They are the Ranger Service and the Lifeguard Service. The Ranger Service complements the Royal Barbados Police Force, which is now called the Barbados Police Force because we're moved on from the Queen. And the lifeguards, they are trained up to the standard of Bronze Cross through Canada, and we have 70 located at 15 of the most popular beaches in Barbados. In 1998, as one of our first reports into beach management, the Coastal Zone Management Unit commissioned a report on the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan for Barbados, which determined the use of most beaches to be recreational by both locals and visitors. Some of the recreational activities that we would see would be picnicking, sunbathing, beach sports, surfing, jet skiing, snorkeling, and scuba diving. And with tourism being the main income generating industry on island, beaches also make a significant contribution to the economic development of the country. The process for this beach management report would have come through consultation, and this was mainly with government agencies. And they would have assessed the physical conditions and then also assess the ecological resources, and a database was developed. A social survey of users and public forum to find out the concern of the public. Our beaches tend to be widely used, from the artisanal fishermen to the Sunday beach goer. And at some spaces, the space is so heavily utilized that we have to think for future sustainability. The main objective in designating or dealing with beach management in Barbados is to look at the sustainability and the resource management. We aim to reduce conflict, and the protection of species and habitats in the coastal areas is optimal to our success. Right. These are some of the main government agencies that we use for beach management. And first off, we have the NCC, which is the lead agency for beach management implementation. We also have the Town and Country Planning Office, and this deals specifically with development in coastal areas. We also have the Coastal Zone Management Unit, and they do the application of management strategies for coastal erosion, shoreline and property protection, and protection of coastal habitats. There's also the Ministry of Drainage and Works, and they manage stormwater through the maintenance of drainage systems, right? And then there's also the Environmental Protection Department, which looks to control marine pollution, hazardous material management, and regulation. The Ministry of Tourism, they take the leadership role in sustainable development for the Barbados' tourism product. And then the Fisheries Division is concerned with the optimal utilization of Barbados fisheries resources. One of the other main beach management stakeholders would be considered as the Barbados Sea Turtle Project. And the Barbados Sea Turtle Project is a non-governmental entity based at the University of West Indies. And their vision is to restore local turtle population, and this NGO is widely regarded based on their commitment. species and habitat protection are integral to their success. And coincidentally, this entity was only developed in the late 70s due to habitat loss because of massive erosion on the coastlines of Barbados. And this will be presented as one of our main challenges throughout the presentation. Right, this is just a snapshot of some of the partners that we pair with on a daily basis. Right. I will just run you through shortly two incidences that took place where we had to garner stakeholder input. And during this recent period, the coasts of Barbados were battered with intense wave action, which then worsened because of extreme tides, both high and low tides, and a hypermoon. And as a result, these pictured beaches were highly eroded. Right, this is on the south coast. This is called Turtle Beach and Sandals. As a result, we had the coconut trees being felled across this entire beach area. And the mechanism that we have in place is through our beach rangers. And they would have contacted the chief of rangers, who would have contacted the technical department and the management NCC. And then we would have mobilized our main partners, such as the Coastal Zone Management Unit and the same Barbados Sea Turtle project. And for this instance, the Barbados Sea Turtle project, they didn't have any turtle nests in this area, right? But for Coastal Zone Management and us, we decided that these extreme conditions were not going to last forever. And because of the existence of the hypermoon and the high and low tides, the conditions should have tapered off a bit. So we decided to leave it. And if it worsened, we would decide to look at some management intervention schemes. This happened the 18th of April. At today's date, the sea has calmed down considerably and some of the sands have actually returned. Right? And if you look at both photographs, you will see some of the beach vegetation. You see the felled coconut tree and the sea grapes. The sea grapes tend to limit the erosion. So at present, we're going through the thought process with repopulating this area with sea grape trees so that we will enhance the stability of this particular beach. Right. This second instance is more for property management as well. And erosion, this is on the west coast of Barbados. And erosion occurs for various reasons. And the pictured beach on the west coast has been severely damaged, and the property adjacent to this beach assessed applied to the Town and Country Planning Office to recharge this area with sand. The mechanisms that we have allowed for this would be all the relevant stakeholders would be brought up to speed on this particular application. So we have this application called the Town Planners app. And for instances such as this, where beaches are on the track or where one of the householders need or the property owners need to carry out beach rehabilitation work, most of the stakeholders are invited to view all the documentation for this application. But this particular one, the property owner only wanted to recharge the area with sand. But truth be told, if they recharge the area with sand, the conditions that occurred and currently exist at this beach, it would just take away the sand. So it'd be one swift movement. It will probably take a couple of days to a couple of months. So all the stakeholders would have sat down, and the main decision, we would have commented on this application, and then the decision would have rested with the Town and Country Planning Office. Right. And for a couple of the challenges and issues of beach management in Barbados as it relates to particular agencies. And for the Coastal Zone Management Unit, their main concerns is the protection of sand dunes, beach vegetation, and revegetation, and also the illegal erection of beach management structures such as breakwaters and groins. And with the EPD, their main focus is the maintenance of sand quality and water quality to stipulated standards. And the tourism industry is concerned with its indiscriminate dumping along the coastlines of Barbados. For the NCC, we also would have identified indiscriminate dumping as one of our major challenges. And there's also the competition for beach space. At particular beaches on the south coast and also on the west coast, we have what we consider smaller spaces, but a wide array of uses for the beaches. We'll take, for example, the beach at Carlisle Bay. On what we call cruise ship days, these beaches are inundated with persons getting off the cruise ships. Then there's also the competition for space with local users, and then also persons that make the daily living from the same beach uses, such as chair rentals. So what the NCC would have done in some of these areas, especially popular areas, we would have limited the amounts of beach licenses that we would have sent out. And we also would have challenges with illegal beach vending at these beaches. When these popular beaches come into play, you will find almost everyone wants to come down to this particular beach to sell their beers, right? And the drainage unit, their main concern is the impact of stormwater on the marine environment and also the indiscriminate waste dumping in gully ecosystems. Our gully ecosystems are also part and parcel of our drainage sections. So when we get events of high rainfall, the drainage ditches, which are inundated with garbage, this garbage tends to make its way to the marine environment. And for the Barbados Sea Turtle project, we have an ongoing problem where coastline lighting disrupts turtle nesting. And property owners tend to look at the security aspect of it, but the security aspects tend to mandate lots of lighting for the area. And this lighting tends to lead the turtles, especially the small ones, away from the marine environment and onto the beach side where they are crushed by cars. And the Town and Country Planning Office, their main challenge is illegal coastline development. Right. And with illegal coastline development, I will take you through this most common problem. The west coast of Barbados, the property owners, the properties tend to change hands on a regular basis. We find persons coming in, buying the property, and then selling it. So when this occurs, the new homeowner tend to want to redevelop the property. So they will try to put in like groins and breakwaters at some point because they feel that the erosion that is at present is not seasonal but long-term erosion. So they tend to go ahead and put in management structures. So these management structures tend to also limit the entire beach cell. So what they think is a progressive recommendation or response, it tends to damage the entire beach cell, right? And this seasonal erosion would now turn into long-term erosion, not only affecting the said property, but also the neighboring properties, right? And the input of agencies such as NCC and CCMU is especially integral in the maintenance of these beaches in Barbados, right? This is just an idea of what we were speaking about with the management challenge where it comes to competition for space and issuances of licenses. So we see in the background, the beach is totally full, right? We would have tried, and through our newest edition of the Barbados Beach Management Plan, we would have enlisted the help of carrying capacities. And all the beaches in Barbados were visited with a view of finding out what's the optimum amount of persons that can be accommodated at each particular beach. So our new beach management plan is still a work in progress. Right. And for some of our engagement and compliance, we will look at the necessary resources. And our resource pool for beach management would include beach rangers and the lifeguards. But we find that what we would need to do is retrain and continuous training of current beach management enforcement staff. And this would not only be for the rangers or the lifeguard, but also for the Marine Police and the Royal Barbados Police Force. And we'd also try to look at enhanced use of technology. And we're in a time frame now where we can use drones and use drones effectively. So we won't expect to have a massive workforce on the beaches. Instead, we would look towards using drones and the enhanced use of technology. And we also believe that based on the current beach use, we need to increase the staff complement of NCC staff, which should be the lifeguards and rangers. And not only for the beaches, but also for the marine protected areas. The aim of NCC is to continue onward from this one marine protected area that we have now into developing a system of connected protected areas, right? And then also we would like to go into the use of existing laws as it relates to beachfront development and the enforcement of stricter penalties for illegal vending and development. And with the conflict resolution, the rangers or NCC rangers have the power of arrest, but it's kind of low key. And they always tend to work in tandem with the Royal Barbados Police Force, right? And for some of the popular beaches, such as the one identified earlier in the previous slide, they work pretty closely with the Royal Barbados Police Force. And the Royal Barbados Police Force is the ultimate law of the land, and the counterparts, the Marine Police, assist in the sea interactions. And they assist the Ranger Service on a day-to-day basis. Right. And one of the main other challenges we've been having is the historical destruction of ecosystems. We will first start with mangrove systems. And at one stage, we had lots of mangroves in Barbados. And mangroves tend to be a good base for marinas. So now at present, we have 2 marinas in the St. Peter area. And with the destruction in the mangroves, it would lead for increased load on the seagrass beds. And the mangrove systems are there to act as a pool to rid the runoff water of some of the nutrients, and also to take away some of the sedimentation that will get into the marine environment. So it's a traditional holding area for runoff water. And the water quality now, as it relates to having the mangrove as opposed to not having it, the sediment load will be greater. So with increased sediment on the seagrass beds, it totally decimated the seagrass beds. And then this increased sediment would have made its way onto the coral reefs. So the coral reefs, through their ecosystem services, such as providing breakwaters for the waves and the wave action to be lessened, which is called wave attenuation. With the increased amount of sediment load on the coral reefs, then the ecosystem services are not allowed to properly be executed. So then we have destruction and damage to the coral reefs. Right. And what are some of our solutions? And our solutions center around water quality management and management interventions. And with water quality management, we recently would have the south coast of Barbados. And the south coast of Barbados is sewered, with most residents and businesses being connected. It has had its past challenges, but areas such as Carlisle Bay are testament to the effect of better water quality. And we will also look at water augmentation, such as repurposing runoff waters from flood events. And we will use it for softer usage, such as irrigation and car washing. And this in turn will limit the amount of runoff water entering the marine environment. And for Barbados, which is a water scarce country, it would also save water for the grand public. And Carlisle Bay, as a result, would have seen a further development of the species and the abundance of species because of having the South Coast Sewage Project. And the water quality, once it's left for at least 5 years, you will see and especially with optimal conditions returning, you will see the return of the keystone species such as seahorses, sea anemones, and the turtles and the soft corals will live and thrive off this area. Right? But along with management, we will look at ecosystems restoration and rehabilitation. Unfortunately, it's far gone for the seagrass beds. But still in Barbados, we have areas such as Chancery Lane, Graham Hall Swamp, and the Whole Town Hole, which are the only remaining mangrove swamps we have in Barbados. And the focus now should be with respect to restoration and rehabilitation. The Graham Hall Swamp and the Whole Town Hole can thrive. The Graham Hall Swamp especially, they have lots of younger mangroves, and having systematic replanting in some of the other areas such as the Whole Town Hole and the Chancery Lane area will give these areas a boost into returning to the normal ecosystem functioning, right? And the Graham Hall Swamp was quite recently challenged or threatened by anthropogenic impacts. And only last week, I was invited to be part of a panel of conservationists, which included residents and NGOs, to assess and recommend on proper management. And for our coral reefs now, the time is not too far gone. We would have had enlisted the coral, and they would deal with coral restoration. And although they have not garnered immediate success, they have tapped into the easy and available markets for funding in this respect. And it would tend to cast my mind back to areas like Laughing Bird Key in Belize. And I would have went to Belize on one occasion through the Folkestone Marine Reserve. And with restoration and rehabilitation, the Laughing Bird Key exhibits all the nice traits that we wish to replicate in places like Barbados and smaller island developing states. And we would also look at public awareness as a tool for letting the general population understand the importance of coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass beds. And for the last 11 years, we've had one secondary school go over to the Folkestone Marine Reserve on an annual basis to look at the coral reef ecosystem. And what we do at Folkestone for the Queen's College School, we teach them how to swim, how to snorkel, and we then take them onto the coral reef ecosystems. We also walk them through the mangrove system at the Whole Town Hole, which is close to the Folkestone Marine Reserve. And this gives the students an idea of what good mangroves, functioning seagrass beds, and then ecosystems can provide. And this is all seen in the return to the ecosystem services, where we have nice white sand, white beaches at all spaces in Barbados due to the return of the ecosystem function of the coral reefs. And we would like to take this education further through all schools in Barbados, both primary and secondary. But one of the drawbacks is having the resources available to take younger children out on boats to snorkel. It has to have a proper public awareness campaign. And for the area that we saw at Turtle Beach on the south coast and Sandals, we would have said that we would look at replanting and revegetating that particular area, but we would not use the coconut trees. The coconut trees tend to have a very shallow root system, and with the onset of erosion, once the erosion gets in the root system, the coconut trees tend to topple. With the sea grape trees, which we have pictured here, they tend to have a deeper root system. So this increases the amount of stability that this particular beach will have, as opposed to one that is planted with coconut trees. And we have one project earmarked for the Needham's Point on the south coast, where we are looking at replanting this particular area with seagrass beds, with part seagrass beds, but also sea grapes and sea yams to keep the beaches less eroded and also enhance the stability, but also trying to get back the turtle population onto some of these beaches. And this photograph gives you an idea of one of our management interventions. And this is what we call an engineer intervention. And this takes place due to tremendous consultation between government agencies in Barbados. And the above photos show the Sir Richard Haynes Boardwalk located on the south coast. This is an engineer intervention, both to limit the impacts of erosional events and to mitigate against expected sea level rise exacerbated by climate change. The Coastal Zone Management Unit, one of our partners in beach management, with the responsibility for the application of management strategies for coastal erosion, shoreline and property protection, protection of coastal habitats. This is one of the true success stories, and as a result, we also have intervention structures planned for some of the West Coast beaches and also some of the short-term beaches where we have lots of seasonal erosion. So this is what our most popular engineer intervention looks like. And this is called a boardwalk. It's board in its finest, but it also has a concrete base. And as a result, these areas would have lesser events of erosion. And the only challenge we had since this was conceptualized was that over the same April the 18th, when we had the hypermoon and the high swells, this boardwalk was beset with lots of sand. So the sand tended to through longshore drift to make its way down to specific areas. And this is one such area that was boosted by the increase of sands on this section of the coast. So right now, as a matter of fact, we have crews working on this particular boardwalk, shoveling off sand in an attempt to get it back to this kind of aesthetic quality, right? And that is my final slide. But let me speak on one more topic before I go. The other challenge that we have been having is the Sargassum Seaweed. And the Sargassum Seaweed has made its way to Barbados shore since 2011. And as a result of the influx of sargassum, we would have had challenges with fisheries. It is unsightly at some of the beaches, which we deem as visitor spots. And as a result, the NCC, through some of the other interagency collaboration, would have been mandated to clean and clear the beaches of Sargassum Seaweed. And what we have done, we have also repurposed the Sargassum Seaweed. We are not only known as a beach management entity, but also as a space maintenance personnel. And we have a nursery on site, and we also beautify particular spots and spaces on the coast and on the terrestrial sides of Barbados too. So what we do with the Sargassum seaweed is take it into our nursery, we allow the opportunity to break down, and then we add it to our soil mix. We add it to also use for farmers for intervention for pests such as slugs. So on the west and south coast of Barbados, we tend to remove it pretty quickly, but on the east coast, we tend to leave it. And what we have also found is that when this sargassum seaweed breaks down, it also goes back to sand. It forms a very fine particulate sand grain. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I'm sure we all learned a great deal. I certainly did from your presentation. Before we go on to some more questions, I just wanted to ask if you could help us understand the severity of coastal beach erosion a little bit. You talked about the hypermoon very recently having a big impact. I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on anthropogenic climate change and what effects a rising sea level might have on our beaches in the future.
Well, for the expected sea level rise, Barbados is very flat, a very small space as well. As I said in the first slides, we're only 166 square miles, and it's an island, so it's surrounded by coastline. Most of the coastlines are extremely low lying. So with the expected sea level rise, we expect that the low land surfaces are going to be inundated with salt water, right? And this in turn will play on with the coral reefs. We expect that coral reefs tend to want crystal clear water to grow and to continue that growth. With the sea level rise, we expect that they're going to be a little bit deeper, so they're not going to get that sunlight and the growth factor being possible. So we expect to, if the concern for sea level rise as it states, we're going to lose quite a bit of our coral reefs. With the coral reefs going, we will also lose the nurseries for the fish species. We have a very very vibrant um, fisheries industry. We will also lose our ecosystem services, and this would lead to further erosion. So without the ecosystem services available, such as wave attenuation, you will get the waves breaking on the shoreline with all their intensity and just taking away and eroding the already eroded coastlines of Barbados.
And you'd spoken as well about restricting water runoff from the island. With an increased sea level rise, would you see more runoff from the island affecting the marine ecosystems?
Well, runoff water in its truest sense is a massive problem for us small island developing states. We are challenged by being water scarce, one, and two, with the amount of sediments that would leave, and not only sediments, we also look at pesticides that we leave in the middle of the island for fertilizers and making the way onto the coral reefs and also damaging the coral reef ecosystems. So that also is one of the possibilities and one of the problems that and challenges that we have been faced with. But the sedimentation is one of the worst problems that we have in Barbados when we have high rainfall events. So once the rain falls heavily enough, most of the water drains and the channels are broken, and the high sediment load water is emptied into the sea, into the marine environment. And then this goes on to the coral reefs, and this blankets the coral reefs, leading to their death or their inability to probably function with the same ecosystem services.
Would we have any questions from the audience, perhaps, as well? Got a couple I'd like to ask as well, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
I was also wondering, Carlos, if you could explain to us. We in Bermuda, of course, rely on our beaches quite heavily for our tourism industry as well. If you could explain some of the kind of main drawbacks behind beach tourism and what we can potentially do to protect our beaches while still utilizing them for tourism.
Well, our drawbacks, especially, would have been coastal development. And for tourism now, we'll get that increased load on some of our beaches. And our beaches are used recreationally for locals as well. So you will have that competition between locals and tourists and visitors, sorry. But it's not to the point in Barbados where we're extremely concerned. We have days where we have the cruise ships coming in, and those days are days that the locals tend not to be on the beaches. Our local beach days will be on weekends and bank holidays. So we have different day uses for our beaches. So our locals will use our beaches on weekends and bank holidays, and we tend to get tourists or visitors using the beaches in the middle of the week and special cruise ship days. So there's no real major conflict. The only other conflict that we would have had was with the types of usage, like with the jet skis, speed boats, and beach vending. So what the Folkestone Marine Reserve would have done was zonation, and zonation allowed for the for this for the uses to be carefully defined in specific spaces. So we have spaces where you have water sports usage, and then we have spaces where we have recreational activities only condoned. So with zonation, especially in Folkestone Marine Reserve, limited most of our challenges and our competition for the beach space.
If I may as well, Carlos, you'd mentioned that the NCC had been taking public consultations on beach management as well, but had been constrained through lack of resource. Could you explain a little bit more about what shape the public consultations have taken in effect and what they could be doing to improve?
Well, we in Barbados have a very public forum called Down to Brass Tacks, and it is a radio program, and all the concerns of our residents or her population tend to be aired on brass tacks. So if we have a challenge with beach management or beach use, we definitely will hear it on brass tacks first. But for our consultations, we tend to use town hall meetings. So if we are going to say erect a new five-story hotel on the south coast of Barbados, we do a town hall event. So the residents will get to have their say as to what they expect, and the developers will be given the opportunity to allay their fears.
And if I could as well, Carlos, if I could ask you just to give some advice perhaps to other people who are involved in beach protection and management back here in Bermuda. We have a number of local groups that are actively involved in attempting to protect Bermuda's beaches, but the issues of plastic pollution and coastal erosion are beginning to get to some of us. I'm wondering if you could share some inspirational words and advice that keeps you going on this fight.
Well, you need to manage for the future, and managing for the future has parts of the present involved in it. So you need to look at your present, what you have at present, and try to keep the biodiversity content. Um, I would have said that we would have lost quite a lot of our mangroves and also seagrass beds, and what we can only function on our look towards um, restoration and rehabilitation is through coral reefs. But manage your ecosystems properly and with a view of the future at hand, because what I would have seen in my lifetime and what I'm not seeing now are totally different eras. Um, in my early days, I would have seen lots of different species along the coastline, even with the long spine black sea urchins, even with the parrotfish. I have seen lots of varieties of these species. And now, sadly, most of them are gone. And one of the areas that you could definitely look at is the parrotfish and the fish that tend to limit the algae on the areas of the coral reefs. As you will know, the parrotfish tends to have an effect on sand, and parrotfish pool is at least 1-2% of the sand that we have on some of our beaches, and it is a delicacy. And I would have seen Jamaica would have moved towards banning sales for the parrotfish, using the parrotfish. So that was a good step. Looking at rehabilitation and restoration for mangrove systems, trying to keep the seagrass beds that you have, and also the public outreach to schools and through the not only schools or kids, but through the all the whole population. Because we have cases where persons don't understand the link or the correlation between healthy coral reefs and nice sandy beaches. So to get that out there would be fantastic. And if you manage to do that well, then you're well on your way towards sustainability.
If I may, I've got a question in the audience.
Hi, good afternoon. Just a question about trash or litter. Does the Barbados, do they have any huge challenges with litter on the beach and being able to remove trash in timely manner, especially in your areas where you have high volumes of tourists coming in? You mentioned about cruise ships. The second part to that question is, has the commission or other stakeholders recently put in any bans on uses of plastic or glass or what can be brought onto your beaches? And perhaps that may be assisting in general with trash.
Okay, thanks for your question. We have had our challenges on beaches with indiscriminate dumping. And what we have found is that if persons see an area with trash, they tend to add to it, and they keep adding to it until it's removed. If you have your resources doing so well that if you have an area where you have trash and you can go and collect it as quickly as possible, that goes well. But we have also our popular beaches. Rockley is one of our popular beaches. Miami Beach. And at some of these beaches, we would place what we call skips, which are extremely big receptacles. And what we have found when we place skips at these locations, we found some of the residents, especially around Christmas time, bringing down their old appliances, their old fridges, their old stoves, TVs, and dump them in the skips. Yes, we don't want them to dump them anywhere else but places where we can see them and where we can easily remove them. But you can imagine the amount of waste that comes from households and waste that can be kept at households so that you will use our spaces, our receptacles for our beach litter. And we have had a ban on plastic bags. And this was for the whole island, not only on beaches, but we look at viable solutions and viable alternatives. But needless to say, some of the alternatives are not the best possible alternatives. Take, for example, the straws. Um, the plastic straws are stronger. The replacement or the alternative straws, and the receptacles for food, most of them when they're wet, they tend to disintegrate pretty quickly. So that in itself is a massive challenge towards adopting better ways and better types of garbage. With the skips and stuff that we had at some of our public beaches, we removed them and replaced them with garbage cans. And as you know, the garbage cans are quite smaller, and you can't get stoves and fridges in the garbage cans. So that has been going pretty well. So we tend to remove them, especially at our popular beaches, on a daily basis. So that is going well. And we tend to do, if I may say, a pretty good job with maintaining clean beaches, especially.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Hope that answered your question, sir. If I may, I'd like to thank Carlos as well for sharing how Barbados has deployed sustainable ocean strategies around beach management. It's our hope that our presentation here today inspired and encouraged discussions throughout Bermuda and across other island communities. Thank you, Carlos.
You're welcome.
If I may. And I would also like to reach out our thanks to Chubb Bermuda, the sponsor of our BUEI Talks Island SOS series. And please join us next month on June 25th at 4 p.m. when the focus shifts to the Isle of Man and with Bill Dale, the Executive Director of Beach Buddies. I'm William Campbell. See you guys next time.